Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Lindsay Amico. I am the Vice President of the Education Committee for Buffalo Niagara Sales and Marketing Executives. So I helped plan this whole event, and then I'm also a mindset coach. Started my own business called Picture Perfect Mind. I did that about 3.5 years ago. I just had this, I guess, intuition and calling to start this because I just felt like there were so many people, and there still are in this world, that need so much help with their mental health, their physical, emotional, energetic health, whatever it is. And especially whether we are a college student, we're a post-grad, we're in the professional world, wherever we are, high school, doesn't matter, we're always going to be facing some kind of stress. Every stage in life, whether it's a good stress or a bad stress, or everything's going to crap at the moment, or we're in kind of a stable mode, there's just going to be different seasons. And especially with the pandemic, I think every single one of us understands life is just weird sometimes. That's the best way that I can put it. And so my presentations really talk about how, life is weird. Stress is hard. We're going through stuff, and really how to have compassion for ourselves through whatever we're experiencing. In every single one of my presentations, I always say, take what serves you and leave the rest. So I'm going to give a bunch of different tools here, but let's say, it's overwhelming to you, or you just don't feel like it, or maybe meditation isn't your thing. Maybe I mentioned something and you're just like, I don't like that. Just leave it. See what really speaks to you, even if it's just one small thing, and then start to apply that. And know that you can always come back to this recording for a little refresh, a little reminder. I'll also give my information at the end of the presentation. So of course you can always reach out, ask me some questions, have a one-on-one, stuff like that. Okay. I am looking at the chat throughout, so please feel free to type, ask a question, relate to something that I'm sharing. You can also send it directly to me in the chat. If you drop down from that everyone tab to just Lindsay Amico, then it'll go directly to me. I won't say your name, but I think we all know, like, Zoom can sometimes be really lame, and the more we connect, the better everything is. So I wanted to start us out with a very brief meditation. Obviously, if you're driving, doing something while you're listening, do not do this. If you've never meditated before, that's completely okay. You're just going to listen to my voice, and it's going to be about 3 minutes. So close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. Keep them open or just gaze downward if that's more your jam. Place your palms upward if you'd want to be more receiving today, if you're waiting for that thing to come in, that job, that email, whatever. And place them down if you're like, you know what, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I want to be more grounded today. And let's just begin by connecting to the breath. Just kind of noticing where it's existing in our bodies at this moment. Feeling the breath in the back of the throat. Feeling the breath as it moves down into our lungs. Feeling the breath through the nostrils. Feeling our chair beneath us. Feeling our feet on the floor. Maybe we're wearing socks or shoes, wiggling our toes. seeing if we can hear any sounds around us. Just observing what is present in our current reality. And maybe the mind is really busy today. Maybe there's a lot of distractions. Maybe you are multitasking. Maybe you're thinking about what you're doing this afternoon or just everything you have on your plate. Just acknowledging that the mind feels busy today and not fighting that. Just noticing. Setting an intention to feel a certain way as we leave our presentation. So how do you want to feel when we finally hop off? Do you want to feel motivated? Do you want to feel excited, calm, focused, inspired? And just setting that intention for yourself. Whenever you feel ready to do so, gently opening your eyes back to the room, maybe taking in one last deep breath here. Just letting yourself readjust, and feel free to type into the chat, how was that experience for you? Do you like meditation? Do you despise it? Have you ever tried it before? Yay. And everyone feels differently about it. And of course, it's a practice, but I would never say force yourself to meditate. It's a great stress reduction tool, but some people, yeah, it's difficult. Catherine says, hard to keep my brain from wandering. And that's the practice. Very calming, relaxing, good. That's the practice. Is I do the same thing, but the mind will wander because that's what it does. And then I say, oh my gosh, I'm not good at this. I'm failing at this. It's kind of like if you started working out and you can't do a push-up, and then you're like, well, I'm just not going to work out because I can't do a push-up, right? It's okay, this is difficult, but this is where I am. This is the world that I live in, has so many distractions. I can pick up my phone at any time and I can see so much information. So know that it's not you. Know that it's all of us. We're used to taking in so much information, having so many thoughts. And while this is great, it is going to invoke stress. We don't have this micro focus anymore. Everything is everything. Anything we want to Google, we can do in 2 seconds. So just have some compassion for yourself here. Setting the intention of how you want to feel leaving, of course. And asking yourself, okay, what is my biggest stressor currently? Feel free to type into the chat, whether you want to send it directly to me or share with everyone, either way. Is it school? Is it maybe someone sick in your family? Is it a relationship struggle? Is it more of a mental health thing? Maybe it's your biggest stressor is kind of yourself and your thoughts. Is it maybe just a conflict with a family member? Someone said school and work. Totally typical. What to do upon graduating. Yeah. And I remember that. I went to college when I was 17. And I've always been very type A, very, somewhat successful in school. That's kind of my identity. And I remember really fighting to keep that in college. And that was really stressful. Thinking that every exam was the most important, every grade, every new relationship, every new friendship. I went away to school in Boston. So it was very anxiety driven for me. It was very needing to feel safe and okay, and not being close to my family and friends anymore from home. So it was a lot. And yeah, trying to figure out my major. I started off as a psych major, which makes a lot of sense now because this is what I do. And I switched to environmental studies and political science, and that was great as well. So trying to figure out where I was going to go. Okay, so stress is normal. Our body goes into fight or flight when there's something going on. We're obviously not typically in actual danger, but our body's going to react as though it is. And so then more and more is asked of us. Maybe we're working more shifts, taking more classes. Maybe we have a parent who's kind of critical of how much we're doing, how little we're doing. Then we just get into exhaustion, ill health effects, and burnout. And then if you're anything like me, you might find yourself just watching Netflix while scrolling your phone, playing a game on your phone, and trying to kind of avoid the world, right? Like, how can I just cope so I can continue to exist? How can I try to shut my brain off so I'm not as anxious? And I want you to know that stress just occurs when we have a mismatch between our demands and our resources. So resources are time, energy, finances, patience, problem-solving ability, and physical, emotional, and mental health. So we really also have to come back to what is our thought about this time, because that's really emphasizing our resources. So for example, let's say I have a thought that says, if I don't figure out what I'm doing upon graduation, I'm in trouble. I'm not going to be okay. I'm going to fall behind. What if I don't like the job that I get? What if I end up taking a job and I hate it? What if I don't make enough money? What if I can't move out? These are all examples. It doesn't mean you're actually thinking these things. It's just some things you might be thinking. How am I going to have the time to study for this thing coming up while I'm working this double shift? So when we have some of those thoughts, which are normal, that's going to impact our emotional resources, of course. Of course, I have to mention phones because we all have them, but we take in so much information. And this stat is from 2011. Practically a million years ago at this point. But we are taking in so much info, and the mind is just kind of struggling to keep up. So when it comes to the phone, you know what probably works for you, what doesn't work for you. But I want you to know that it is an addiction to some degree that we all have. When we look at our phones, we get a hit of dopamine. And so that's why we're always going back to it. Notice who you follow. Notice what apps you're on. If you have a tip that's really worked for you with your phone, feel free to share it. But notice how when you're on Instagram, when you're on TikTok, notice how you start to feel by the end. It's really hard not to click on the app. I personally have those settings where you can limit your time on the app, but of course you can always override it. But noticing, wow, I just watched that 3-minute TikTok and now I feel really bad about myself. Or wow, that was actually really motivating. Instead of continuing to scroll, maybe I can toss my phone to the side for a second and start to do the thing that I was going to do. Obviously, I'm simplifying this. It's not always this easy, but what is genuinely worth my attention here? If I am taking 4 classes and I'm trying to figure out an internship and I'm working, how much more information am I putting into my brain that might be overloading my prefrontal cortex? Put number 1 in the chat if you can relate on some degree. So I know that I'm hitting the mark. Okay, I got a couple direct messages. Okay. And if I'm not hitting the mark, feel free to share it. Let me know what's going on. Someone says downtime is important. I like to delete social media apps when my usage gets too high for my liking, and then able to ease myself back in. Exactly. It's kind of that back and forth. It's like we notice I'm feeling drained again. I'm feeling emotional. I'm feeling like I'm staying up at all hours of the night. I'm feeling just like crap. Maybe that's the signal to delete some of the apps. Give yourself a day, even if you take a day off of social, and that might be out of the realm for you. Maybe that's not possible. But if you take a day off of social, just seeing, how do I feel? Okay, at first it was incredibly difficult. I kept wanting to pick up my phone and click on something. Then the day got a little easier. Maybe I turned to some homework that I had to do. I attended a class. I talked to a friend. I cleaned my room. Okay, then I, decided to watch a show at night, or I went out to dinner, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden you get through the day, just as an experiment, see how you feel. Obviously, we're going to use our phone and many other things to procrastinate or avoid. Makes sense. So what is happening here is that our prefrontal cortex is this great part of our brain that helps us to focus. So if you're on this presentation now, you're somewhat focused, your prefrontal cortex, maybe I ask you a question, you're responding, that's working, okay? But your brain can only handle so much. So when we feel overwhelmed and we're like, I can't do anything, that's when our amygdala steps in and it's like, everything is the most important, but I can't do anything. And I'm just going to stay in paralysis. And I want you to know that however you're coping with that, maybe you sleep a lot. Feel free to put your favorite coping mechanism in the chat. Maybe it's social media. Maybe it's TikTok. Maybe it's sleep. Maybe it's video games. Maybe it's, it can be a healthy coping mechanism as well. It could be hanging with friends. It could be eating. It could be walking. But knowing that avoidance, cooking, I love it. I love to cook too. Knowing that avoidance is emotional self-regulation. So when you're procrastinating writing that paper, that sucks because you're like, why am I doing this? But it's emotional self-regulation. Listening to music. Yeah. My husband owns Buffalo Iron Works, which is next to the arena. And I love going to a show. That was really hard with the pandemic. Watching a comfort movie, exercising. And I think, it sounds corny if I'm like, oh, become your own best friend. But when you start to get to know yourself and you start to remember what you really like to do and remember that life is about living and not just about succeeding, right? Not just about getting things done and productivity. It's about actually enjoying things and remembering what you like. Giving yourself time for that and not making yourself feel guilty. Because when we get in these extremes of, well, I'm going to sit and play video games for 24 hours, or I'm not going to do it at all. How can we start to let ourselves have those rewards? So emotional self-regulation. So when we find something to be overwhelming or negative or stressful, we're going to avoid it. So how do we overcome procrastination and avoidance? I want you to remember there's a trigger, there's a pattern to avoid, and the reward is to get stress relief. So the trigger is, oh my God, I don't want to do the paper. The pattern is, I'm going to avoid it. And the reward is, I feel a little better. So I want you to acknowledge your stress. Okay, I want to avoid, I'm stressed. Go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Interrupt the habit. And let's say it's a paper. I want you to open up the Word document on your computer and maybe type your name at the top of it. I want you to ask yourself, if I were to do it, what would I do? Well, I'd sit down at my computer. I'd open up Microsoft Word. I'd put my name at the top, the title, and maybe I'd type the first sentence. What we've actually found is when you start something, 80% of the time you continue. So even if you just set your timer for 5 minutes and you say, I'm going to start this paper, allowing yourself to get the ball rolling, put your phone, it's crazy. Let me know if you've heard of this, but I just saw a TikTok, speaking of TikTok, where there's boxes now that you can put your phone in and you can set, like, it's a lock and you set a timer. Maybe if you really need to do that, putting your phone in the box for an hour and putting a timer on and saying, I'm just going to focus on this paper for an hour. And yeah, it's going to be really hard for me to focus probably, but I'm going to see if I can get the ball rolling. It works the same as doing the dishes, cleaning your room, any of the things that we don't want to do. Asking yourself, if I were to do something, what would I do? Right? Like I said, I would open up Microsoft Word. For me, I do a lot of presentations. So I'm like, okay, if I were to do something, I would open up PowerPoint. So what do I need today? This is one of the biggest things, is becoming aware of our thoughts and remembering when I realized that I am not my thoughts. That was a huge breakthrough for me because, like I said, I've always been more success driven, more overachiever. That's evolved as I've gotten older, but there were thoughts that said, if you don't get an A, this isn't good. This isn't good enough. So even taking 5 minutes and just doing a thought dump and seeing, okay, I'm super overwhelmed and stressed right now. I don't know where to start. What's on my mind? Not editing, writing it out. And starting to question which thoughts are real, which thought is impacting my emotional state right now. And realizing we don't need to stay there. We can change our minds. This alone increases our resilience and self-mastery. So just realizing, okay, I've had these thoughts a lot and they're really annoying, but I've had them for a long time. And if I can just start to realize, oh, okay, this thought is making me feel bad. Is it possible to shift? Or is it possible to separate myself and say, oh yeah, I'm having this thought, but it's really not real. I'm the one that's making it real. Is the thought serving me? You know, if I say I absolutely have to get an A in this class or I failed, is that true? Can we potentially adjust our expectations? Can we either bring them higher or lower, depending on what we need? I really like to use this thought management model. So if, let's say you took 5 minutes and you wrote down all your thoughts, and you'll probably find some pretty weird ones in there, right? But the thought really invokes a feeling, an action, and then a result. So perfect example, COVID-19, right? That really messed up our lives, still probably is. Thought that many of us have had. Something wrong with me. I can't get myself to focus. How are other people getting through this? Right? Of course, going to feel anger, frustration, depression. I'm going to compare myself to others. I'm going to scroll and I'm going to be like, why are they doing okay? Then we might struggle to become motivated, feeling that paralysis. The amygdala has shut down the prefrontal cortex. And then we're going to feel defeated and stuck. You know, for me personally, I am an overanalyzer. Obviously having my own business as well, I could sit and overanalyze all day. I could be like, well, what if I do this? Well, what if this person doesn't sign up? Well, what if I say how much I charge? Well, what if they say no? What if they think it's too high? What if they think it's too low? Some of the things that go through my mind, right? And what I want to say about that is, of course, that's going to still happen no matter where we are in our lives. But what I really want to say is action really brings you out of that funk. And I've had to learn it time and time again. And I think that's where the pandemic really forced us to struggle, because we couldn't necessarily get out of our heads. Now, if I'm in my head, I'll force myself to do the dishes, or I'll force myself to go to a cafe. I'll force myself to talk to someone. I'll force myself to do emails. I'll set a timer for 20 minutes. And once I start taking action, the ball starts rolling. It's just another tip I wanted to give. Action follows more action. So if you're feeling yourself stuck on the couch, go take a walk, see if you can expand your perspective a little bit. Once we shift our thought, I'm not the only one who's experiencing this. Let's start by focusing on the most important thing today. And maybe the one thing is, I'm going to go to class today. And that's the one thing I'm going to focus on. That's going to shift some things for us. Instead of, there's something wrong with me, why can't I get myself to focus? Listen, we all have trouble focusing. That's kind of the status quo here. Once we focus on a goal that feels like we can accomplish it for the day, then we can take the action, then we can feel better, and then we can get a result. Instead of saying, well, I can't do anything because there's just too much to do. So some questions I like to ask myself when I start to notice some kind of weird thoughts going on. Who taught me this? Maybe the thought comes up, oh, no one likes me. Who taught me this? Is it true? Is the thought serving me? Does it make me feel good? No, it probably doesn't. Is it leading me toward my goal? Well, maybe my goal is to network or make more friends. Is the thought nobody likes me making me move towards that goal? Probably not. It's just something I've thought for a long time. Could I potentially change it? So maybe it doesn't go to everyone likes me, but it goes to some people like me for sure. Or maybe it goes to I like some things about myself. Here's my top 5 best qualities, or my top 2 best qualities. Where do I have control in my life? So let's face it, many of us have felt out of control in our lives for a while. Where do I have control here? Where can I focus? What really makes me feel good? What's going right? Do I have a roof over my head? Do I have supportive friends or family? Am I going to the school that I want to go to? Am I heading in somewhat of the right direction here? What gets to happen if I change this thought? So thoughts thought over and over again form belief systems. And that's where we start to have these beliefs of, I am a confident person, or I am so not a confident person. It's these thoughts that we think over and over and over again. So identifying the thought can be extremely powerful. And when I say adjust your expectations, I don't mean stop caring about things, of course, but if we care about everything, that's when we really get into overwhelm. So let's say, for me, I keep using myself as an example, but I hated math classes. And so I had to adjust my expectation to say, I'm probably not going to get an A in this class. I'm going to go to as many classes as I can. I'm going to try the best that I can, but I'm going to allow myself to not get an A because that's just too stressful, right? Where can I meet myself here? What's the goal for this semester? And what's going to help me to accomplish that goal? It doesn't have to be getting an A in every single class. It could be going to 85% of my classes for the whole semester. It could be following up with people when I need to follow up. So if they send me an email, I respond within 24 hours. This is all up to you. So it's about what's going to get me to my end goal. I want to acknowledge I'm at 1:30-ish and want to pause. If anyone wants to unmute, ask a specific question, or type into the chat. And I do have some more slides, if not as well.
Lindsay, how do you deal with guilt?
Oh, oh my gosh. That is one of the worst human emotions, I would say. So one thing I'll say about feelings is difficult feelings, guilt, shame, blame. Nobody wants to feel them. There's something that I think is very unique to us as humans. Like, think about it. Think about animals. Do animals really feel guilty? Probably not. So what I do is, there's science that says if you can feel an emotion for 90 seconds, it actually is able to process and move through your body. So as much as we don't want to, let's say we're feeling guilt. Instead of pushing it away or saying, oh, I don't need to feel that, like that's made up. Oh, I hate this emotion. Setting your timer for 90 seconds and allowing yourself to feel guilt. It's going to feel very uncomfortable. It's going to feel weird, right? But seeing how that feels, letting, maybe you end up crying, maybe you end up just getting really angry, allowing that to come to the surface in a safe way. That's going to allow you to be able to process and move forward. I could tell you all day long, guilt is made up. We shouldn't feel guilty. We have to set boundaries. We have to protect our energy and space. All of that's true. You have to be your number one priority, because the bottom line is, without you, nobody else can benefit. But I would never tell you to push emotions down, because that's pretty much our first instinct, is to say, oh, I don't have time for that emotion. And that's when they hang out. If anyone's ever read Your Body Keeps the Score, it's a book about trauma. It's a book about the body. It's a book about how all of that kind of stays stuck, unless we work through it. So I hope that was a helpful answer, but part of life is feeling negative emotions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely relate. I am a people pleaser, so that emotion comes up quite frequently for me.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions before I maybe get through the last couple slides? Okay. And if you come up with something, type it into the chat. I know some of this can be vulnerable, right? Because we're talking about our inner thoughts, our inner feelings, and that's all that adds up to stress. So that's why I talk about things in this way, because if I just came in here and was like, here's how to breathe, like, yes, breathing is an amazing coping skill. Breathe in for 4, hold for 7, release for 8. Or you can do a boxed breathing technique, breathe in for 5, hold for 5, release for 5. But if I just came in here and just talked about, here's all the things you need to do to not be stressed, but didn't really talk about the core reason why we're stressed, is probably the thought that we're having about ourselves, right? At the core of what is my internal process about this? Well, my internal process is nothing's going right. I don't have any friends. I'm isolated. I'm stuck. Of course, we're going to feel stuck and isolated, right? Once we can recognize that, say, okay, I'm feeling these things. I have some compassion for myself in this moment. How would I treat my friend if they came to me saying these things? Would I say, just get over it? Or would I say, hey, that sounds really hard. Like, I understand. I've been there before too. And then maybe we shift the thought, or we say, I'm going to do some breathing. I'm going to set my timer for 3 minutes and I'm just going to breathe. I also want to share a 5 senses exercise with us. So meditation's obviously a great coping skill. Type it into YouTube, 5-minute stress reduction meditation. Breathing, of course. And the cool part about breathing is we always have to do it. So whether you're driving, whether you're working on something, breathe. Set the intention for the day. I'm going to try to breathe into my diaphragm. The 5 senses exercise, I'll lead you through it now, but this one is really great when we're stuck in our heads. Sometimes we can't get through our heads, out of our heads, right? So if we're feeling really paralyzed and we're feeling stuck with self-doubt, negative internal dialogue, yeah, we want to say, oh, none of this is real, right? But if we're really stuck, it's time to get back into the body. So do this along with me. If you have a moment, you're not going to shut your eyes. I want you to just notice 5 things that you currently see in your space around you. Just notice 5 things that you see. Maybe remember where you got the thing. Maybe notice the color. And just breathe as you're doing this. I want you to notice 4 things that you feel. So that means physically. So clothing on our bodies, chair beneath us, socks on our feet, or maybe the floor. Maybe we rub our hands together for a moment. Maybe there's a draft in the room, or we just kind of feel our hair on the back of our necks. I'm feeling my hand on my face. What are 3 things that you can hear at this moment? So the sound of my voice, maybe there's something going on outside. Maybe there's someone in our house, or we can hear the heat, the air. Continuing to breathe, is there anything today that you can smell? If not, that's okay too. And then lastly, maybe there's something we can taste. So you can taste a drink that you have. And just seeing how you feel. Feel free to type in the chat, share. This just always gets me back into my physical reality because we truly live up here, right? That's being a human means we have a developed brain, but it doesn't always work for us, right? It can tend to ruminate. It can tend to identify things that are a threat that aren't really a threat. So when we can get back into our reality, we can kind of remind ourselves, oh, I'm safe. Yes, I have a lot of things going on. I'm somewhat safe though. Even if I don't turn in my assignment in enough time, I'm physically safe. I physically exist. I want you to see, especially if you're more of a perfectionist, can you begin to give yourself some credit? What has actually gone right today? So maybe you attended this presentation or other presentations throughout the day. Maybe you drank water, fed yourself, attended a class, talked to a new professional, met someone. Of course, you remember to breathe no matter what, even if you stay in bed all day. But what has been going right for you versus what isn't? When I get overwhelmed, I do like to ask myself what is important and controllable. So first thing in the morning, maybe you have a ton of thoughts rushing through your mind. It makes you just want to stay in bed, stay on TikTok, not do anything. And the reason I say that is because I can completely relate. So I like to disrupt that pattern by maybe taking some action first thing in the morning, maybe going through a short routine, maybe going to make myself some coffee, whatever it is. And then asking what is important and controllable today. So even if it's one thing that I can focus on, what is important and controllable? And I just focus there. And from there, everything else kind of just happens. When we can just get ourselves moving, get ourselves a bit focused, everything can kind of flow from there. We don't need to figure everything out this second. We just need to take one step. And even if you choose wrong, you're still going to get yourself moving. Lastly, mindfulness before we wrap up here. Mindfulness is exactly what I shared with breathing, meditation, 5 senses exercise. It's paying attention on purpose with moment to moment, non-judgmental awareness. So even if for 30 seconds, you paid attention to this presentation today and you observed, and maybe you observed when you got distracted and you came back to the presentation. Oh, I want to reach for my phone and I come back to the presentation. That's mindfulness. So it doesn't have to be this big thing. It can simply be, maybe it is a practice of every night when I get home, I put my phone away for 30 minutes, and that's my act of mindfulness. It can be taking a walk, inside or outside. It can be doing the dishes or doing a chore. It can be eating a bite of food and really savoring it. It can be doing something that you enjoy, that you love to do, watching that comfort movie, cooking, spending time with your family, playing video games, and really savoring that experience. For me, I really enjoy coffee. So it's kind of like taking that sip of coffee and just like being present as best as possible. Of course, tons of benefits with breathing. We did that. And of course, don't be afraid to ask for help. I'm going to actually share my information right now. So here's my email address. You can follow me on Instagram. You can, if you're on Facebook, join the Facebook group. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you reach out and want to have a short Zoom call or a cup of coffee, I'm happy to help you out with that as well. If you feel like I could be helpful at your school, I do presentations like this all the time. Get me in touch with your professor. We'll see if we can work something out. But at the end of the day, thank you so much for coming. I hope that you were able to learn a few things that can help you on a day-to-day basis. And that's what I got. Jean, do you want to see if you can announce who won the gift card for today's session?